Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Nature Channel. It's so good to have you here tonight. Come in, get comfortable, pull your blanket a little closer, let your shoulders drop, and take one slow, easy breath. There's nothing you need to do right now, nowhere you need to be. Just this voice and a gentle story waiting to unfold for you. Tonight, we're going somewhere quite extraordinary, somewhere that feels almost too beautiful to be real, like a painting left out in the soft morning light until all the colors became tender and warm and rose-colored. Tonight, we're visiting the pink lakes of our world. Yes, they're real, scattered across the earth like quiet secrets, bodies of water that blush the most delicate, extraordinary shades of pink and rose and lavender, sitting still beneath open skies, reflecting clouds back up at themselves in colors you didn't know water could hold. There are pink lakes on nearly every continent. Each one arrived at its color through its own slow, patient journey, through salt, through tiny living things, through minerals and light and time. And each one sits in its landscape like a held breath, calm, still, extraordinarily itself. So let's begin there, at the edge of one of these lakes, where the water meets the shore in the softest possible way, where the air smells faintly of salt and warm earth, and where the sky above you is just beginning to go pale and golden at the edges of the afternoon. Take another breath. Let the day go a little more. We begin in Western Australia at a lake called Hillier, which sits on a small island called Middle Island. And from the air, it looks like someone pressed a rose petal into the landscape and left it there among the green trees and the deep blue of the Southern Ocean. Lake Hillier is perhaps the most famous pink lake in the world, and it earns that fame quietly, without any drama at all. The lake is only about 600 meters long. That's small. You could walk along its shore in a matter of minutes, and yet every photograph ever taken of it seems to hold an entire world. The pink is not pale or uncertain. It is vivid, confident, almost cheerful. A strong bubblegum rose that stays consistent whether you look at it in bright sun or on a cloudy afternoon. Most lakes change color depending on the sky above them. Hillier doesn't. It keeps its color the way some people keep their warmth, reliably, in every kind of weather. Scientists spent a long time wondering why, and the answer, when it finally came, was alive. The pink comes partly from a microorganism called Dunaliella salina, a tiny algae that produces a red pigment when the salt content of the water becomes very high. It's one of the smallest living things you can imagine, invisible to your eye, and yet, together, in their millions, these tiny beings paint an entire lake the color of a sunset. Isn't that something? The smallest things working together, making something vast and beautiful. The water of Lake Hillier is extremely salty, far saltier than the ocean. And yet, remarkably, if you were to swim in it, it wouldn't harm you. You would float easily, lifted by the salt, the way you might be lifted in the Dead Sea, and you would be surrounded by that extraordinary rose-colored water on every side. People who have swum there say it feels dreamlike. Of course it does. The island that holds the lake, Middle Island, is a protected nature reserve. Very few people are allowed to set foot there. The lake is seen mostly from the air, looking down from small planes or helicopters, and most photographs of it are taken from above. This means that For almost everyone on Earth, Lake Hillier exists as something glimpsed from a great height. A rosy blush on a green and blue world, seen briefly, held in memory. There's something peaceful in that, something meant to be admired from a gentle distance. Around the lake, the vegetation is dense and green, dense woodland and coastal scrub, the kind of tangled wild green that grows exactly as it pleases. Eucalyptus trees, paper barks, and tea trees crowd close to the water's edge. Their roots hold the shoreline in place. Their leaves move in the sea breeze coming off the Southern Ocean, which is never very far away. You can hear the ocean if you listen, a constant low murmur just beyond the tree line, like a friend talking softly in the next room. The contrast between the pink lake and the deep blue of the ocean, separated by only a narrow strip of land, is one of those views that seems to rearrange something gently inside you. Two bodies of water side by side, utterly different colors, entirely at peace with each other. Lake Hillier was first documented by a European explorer named Matthew Flinders in 1802. He was sailing the southern coastline of Australia and stopped at the island. In his journal, he wrote about the remarkable pink lake with apparent delight. He named the island, and he noted the color of the water. One of the men in his expedition, a crew member named William Hillier, died on that island of dysentery. The lake was named for him. It's a quietly tender thing, isn't it? That someone's name was given not to a mountain or a town, but to something this soft and extraordinary. A pink lake, carrying a name forward through 200 years of Australian sun. By the early 1900s, people had begun harvesting salt from the lake. Salt pans were established, and workers came to the island to do the slow, warm work of collecting. But the salt industry didn't last long on Hillier. The isolation made it impractical, and within a few decades, the lake was left alone again. It went back to being still, back to being quietly, perfectly itself. Today, no industry operates there. The island is protected. The lake continues to be pink, exactly as it has been for longer than anyone has been watching. Let your eyes feel a little heavy. There's no hurry here. Just beyond the boundary of the island, the Southern Ocean stretches away in every direction. Cold, vast slate blue in winter and brilliant turquoise in summer. Whales pass through these waters. Australian sea lions rest on the rocky beaches below the cliffs. Fairy penguins, the smallest penguin species in the world, standing only about 30 centimeters tall, nest in burrows under the coastal scrub not far from the pink water. They come home each evening at dusk, picking their way up the beach in small, earnest groups. Imagine them passing the edge of the pink lake in the fading light, the water going deeper rose as the sun goes down. The penguins, unhurried, heading home. If you're enjoying this gentle journey so far, it would mean a lot if you left a little like on the video. It helps this channel keep growing, keeps these quiet stories coming. And if pink lakes are exactly the kind of dreamy topic you love, there's a whole playlist of nature stories waiting for you here on the channel. No rush. It'll be there whenever you need it. For now, just stay here. The lake is still. The evening is soft. And we've only just begun. The light over Lake Hillier at golden hour does something extraordinary. The already pink water seems to deepen, to warm, to glow from somewhere beneath its surface. as though the color is not just on the water, but inside it. The narrow white strip of shoreline, a pale salt-crusted beach, catches the same light and turns amber. The tree line behind it goes dark and lush, and above everything, the sky performs its own slow color show. Peach, then apricot, then the softest possible purple at the very top of the dome of evening. It would be easy to stay here for a long time, just watching the colors shift. But the world holds many pink lakes, and each one has its own personality, its own story, its own quiet, particular beauty. Let's begin to move through them gently, the way you might turn the pages of a beautiful book on a slow afternoon. No rush, no particular destination, just the pleasure of each new page. Across the continent of Australia, in the state of South Australia, there are salt lakes in the outback that turn pink in summer. Lake Bumbunga is one of them, a flat, shallow salt lake surrounded by low scrub and wide open sky. Unlike Hillier, Bumbunga's color is more variable. In very dry conditions, the lake can almost disappear, leaving behind a cracked white salt pan that shimmers in the heat. But when conditions are right, the right amount of rainfall, the right temperature, the presence of those pink-producing algae, the water blushes. It goes from white to cream to the palest possible pink, and on a clear day, with a blue sky above, it looks like a mirror someone dropped on the flat Australian earth and left there, reflecting something rosier than the world around it. The flatness of the Australian outback gives lakes like Bumbunga a particular quality of silence. There are no hills to catch the wind, no trees to muffle sound. The silence comes from every direction at once, from horizon to horizon, and it sits on you the way a warm hand might, gently, without weight. Driving to Lake Bumbunga on the long, straight roads of South Australia, you can see the pink from a long distance away. It emerges on the horizon like a rumor of color, faint and wavering in the heat. Then slowly it becomes more definite, more real. You pull over, you step out of the car. The salt crunches very softly under your shoes, and you stand there at the edge of a pink lake in the middle of a vast, quiet land, and the world feels enormous and tender all at once. Australia has so many of these lakes that there are entire travel routes built around visiting them. Pink lake road trips, moving slowly through the outback from one rose-colored water to the next, camping beside them in the warm nights, waking up to find the color has changed overnight as the light shifted. Now, let's move. Let's leave Australia, at least for a little while, and travel north and west across the curve of the earth to a very different landscape, to Spain, to the Canary Islands, a group of volcanic islands sitting in the Atlantic Ocean off the northwest coast of Africa, belonging to Spain, but far warmer and wilder than the Spanish mainland. On the island of Gran Canaria, there is a small lagoon called Salinas de Tenerife. It is a salt production site, shallow pools where seawater is allowed to evaporate slowly in the strong Atlantic sun, leaving behind layers of white salt. But in these pools, especially in late summer and autumn, something remarkable happens. The water turns pink, sometimes a pale dusty rose, sometimes, in the right conditions, a vivid flamingo pink that seems almost electric against the dark volcanic rock and the deep blue of the Atlantic. The Canary Islands are volcanic. The rock here is dark and rough, basalt, born from ancient eruptions, cooled into shapes that are still angular and dramatic millions of years later. Against this darkness, the pink of the salt lagoons is particularly striking. It's like finding a rose growing from a cliff face, unexpected, entirely lovely. And here is a wonderful thing about Salinas de Tenerife. It is visited by flamingos, real ones. The long-legged, improbably elegant birds stop here during migrations, drawn by the shallow salt water and the tiny organisms living in it. The same algae that turn the water pink also make up a significant part of a flamingo's diet. The pink color of a flamingo's feathers actually comes from these pigments. They are, in a sense, painting themselves from the inside with the same paint that colors the lake. So you have pink birds standing in pink water, on black volcanic rock, under a blue Atlantic sky. Nature arranging itself into something that feels almost impossibly composed. Flamingos, despite their elegance, are not particularly delicate creatures. They are tough, adaptable, and surprisingly loud. Their calls are deep honking sounds that carry across wide open water. But standing still in a salt lagoon, reflected in pink water, they become part of a silence that seems much bigger than they are. They stand on one leg, a behavior that helps them conserve body heat, and they tuck their long curved necks around to rest, and they become, in those moments, as still as the water beneath them. Let's stay with the flamingos for just a moment longer, because they are deeply connected to pink lakes all over the world. In East Africa, in Kenya and Tanzania, there are vast soda lakes in the Great Rift Valley, where flamingos gather in numbers that are almost impossible to imagine. Lake Nakuru in Kenya is one of these places. The lake is shallow and highly alkaline, not salty in the same way as the Australian lakes, but rich in a type of blue-green algae called spirulina, which the flamingos consume in enormous quantities. In the right season, the shores of Lake Nakuru are lined with flamingos in numbers that have historically reached into the millions. From above, the shoreline looks pink, not the water itself, but the birds. A living, breathing, shifting pink border around the edge of a blue-gray lake. Lake Nakuru sits inside a national park. Rhinos move through the surrounding woodland. Baboons watch from the rocky outcrops above. And down at the water's edge, the flamingos wade and feed in their elegant, unhurried way, entirely unbothered by the rest of the world going on around them. The lake's water level changes from year to year, sometimes dramatically. In years of heavy rainfall, the lake fills and deepens, and the algae becomes diluted, and the flamingos leave, moving to other lakes in the valley in search of the right conditions. Then the rains ease, the water level drops, the algae blooms, and the flamingos return, thousands of them appearing seemingly from nowhere, as if the lake had called them home. You might find, if you notice your breath right now, that it has slowed a little without you asking it to. That's the thing about these gentle, warm, wide-open places. They do something to your nervous system without effort. They just invite you to be still. The Great Rift Valley, that long geological scar running down the length of East Africa, holds several of these alkaline lakes. Lake Bogoria, Lake Magadi, Lake Logipai. Each one sits in a different part of the valley, each with its own character, its own temperature, its own population of flamingos and other water birds. The valley is geologically active. There are hot springs and steam vents near some of the lakes, and the water near these areas can be almost too hot to touch. And yet, the flamingos wade right to the edges of the hot springs, searching for algae, seemingly unconcerned by the warmth bubbling up from the earth beneath them. Lake Logupa in northern Kenya is one of the most remote and least visited of the Rift Valley lakes. It sits in a wide, flat, stony desert landscape, and it shimmers. It can appear pink or pale green depending on the season, and the air above it often wavers with heat in the middle of the day. Very few roads reach it. Very few people see it in person. It exists mostly in photographs and in the memories of the occasional researcher or photographer who makes the long journey out through the desert to find it. There is something I find deeply comforting about places like that, places that are beautiful without needing to be witnessed. The lake is pink whether anyone sees it or not. The flamingos come and go on their own schedule. The hot springs bubble. The desert breathes around the edges. The world is full of beauty happening quietly on its own in places you and I will never visit. Isn't that a restful thought? There is a lake in Senegal on the western coast of Africa called Lac Rose, Lake Pink in French, or sometimes it's called Retba. And for many years, this was perhaps the most accessible and visited pink lake in the world, sitting just a short drive north of the capital city, Dakar, close enough to feel like it belonged to the life of the city, and yet utterly different from it. Lac Rose is a coastal lake, separated from the Atlantic Ocean by a narrow strip of dunes. The sand dunes here are pale and fine, and they shift constantly in the coastal wind, the kind of fine-grained, warm Atlantic wind that carries the smell of salt and a faint sweetness. On one side of the dunes, the Atlantic Ocean rolls in with its big, steady waves. On the other side, Lac Rose sits in its own quiet stillness. The lake's color is produced by the same cast of tiny characters we've met before, Dunaliella salina, the pink-producing algae that loves extreme salt. Lac Rose is one of the saltiest bodies of water on Earth. The salt content in some parts of the lake approaches 10 times that of the ocean. It is so salty that salt crystallizes on everything it touches, on the edges of boats, on the arms and hands of the workers who harvest it, on the reeds at the edges of the lake. Because the lake is so salty, it is one of the few places where traditional salt harvesting is still done by hand, by local workers who wade into the water carrying shallow baskets. They enter the lake in small wooden pirogues, the traditional boats of the West African coast, and scoop the salt from the lake bed by hand. They are in the water for long hours. The salt is so concentrated that prolonged contact with skin can cause irritation, and the workers protect themselves by coating their skin with shea butter before they wade in. This practice has been part of the local economy for generations. Watching a pirogue move slowly across a pink lake in the early morning light, the salt workers' arms moving rhythmically as they scoop, the water parting softly and closing again behind the boat. It's one of those images that holds time differently. It doesn't rush. It doesn't hurry. It belongs to a pace of life that most of us have lost touch with. And watching it from the shore can feel like remembering something. The color of Lac Rose changes throughout the day and throughout the year. In the dry season, roughly from November to May, the lake is at its most brilliant, the salt content at its highest, and the pink deepest. Early morning and late afternoon are the best times, when the low sun catches the water at an angle and the color glows rather than simply exists. At midday, under the high vertical sun, the color can look washed out, paler, less dramatic. But in the golden hours it is extraordinary. There is a fishing village on the edge of the lake. Small boats pull up to the shore. Children play along the water's edge. The smell of grilling fish drifts across from open fires in the evenings. And behind everything, the pink lake sits, as it has sat for centuries, a natural feature so familiar to the people who live beside it that they have woven their lives around it as naturally as they have woven their lives around the ocean. Loch Rose was also, for many decades, the finishing point of the famous Paris-Dakar Rally, the off-road racing event that crossed the Sahara Desert. Drivers would emerge from the desert, exhausted and sand-covered, to find this impossible pink lake waiting at the finish line. A lake the color of something gentle at the end of something hard. There is a poetry to that which seems worth sitting with. The rally has moved its finishing location in recent years, but the lake remains. It doesn't need a race to give it significance. It is significant all by itself. Let's breathe again. Let the weight of the day rest somewhere outside your body. You don't need it tonight. Now, across the Atlantic Ocean, to a very different part of the world, to the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, where the land is flat and limestone and full of hidden water. The Yucatan is famous for its cenotes, those extraordinary natural sinkholes where the limestone has collapsed to reveal underground pools of clear, cool, fresh water below. Thousands of these cenotes dot the landscape, and the ancient Maya considered them sacred, portals to the underworld, places where the boundary between worlds grew thin. But not far from the cenotes, on the northern coast of the Yucatan, there are the Las Coloradas lagoons, a series of shallow coastal lagoons that turn extraordinary shades of pink, red, and orange depending on the season. The color here comes again from microorganisms. Red algae and brine shrimp combine with high salinity to produce colors that can range from the palest blush to a deep terracotta, almost brick red in some conditions. The lagoons sit among mangroves, which are themselves extraordinary things. Mangroves are trees that grow in salt water. Their roots arch above the waterline in complex tangles, like the fingers of giant hands reaching into the shallows. They provide nursery habitat for fish, shelter for birds, and a buffer against storms for the coastline. Walking through a mangrove forest is one of the quieter experiences nature offers. The light comes through the canopy in thin, wavering columns, reflecting off the water below, and the sound is mostly the small lap of water against roots and the occasional bird call from somewhere deep in the tangle. The Las Coloradas lagoons are most brilliantly colored at certain times of year. Late summer and early autumn tend to produce the deepest reds and pinks. Local fishermen have known about the colors for generations, but the lagoons became widely known internationally through social media photographs only in the last decade or so. Now, they are visited by travelers from around the world who come to stand at the water's edge and hold their hands over the surface to see their reflections turned rose. If you've been enjoying these soft lake stories, if they're helping you wind down and drift a little, a quiet like on the video would be so appreciated. It's a small thing, that helps this channel keep these stories alive and keeps them coming to you. And the playlist is always there, full of other peaceful journeys just like this one. The northern Yucatan is flat and wide and bright. The sky here feels enormous. No mountains, no hills, just the wide Caribbean sky arching from horizon to horizon. The flamingos come here too, the same birds or their cousins following the same logic, shallow, salty, warm water full of the tiny organisms that feed them and color them. They stand in the Las Coloradas lagoons in small groups, their pink bodies reflected in pink water, and they seem entirely at home. In the very early morning at Las Coloradas, before the visitors arrive, the lagoons belong entirely to birds and wind. Herons stand motionless at the water's edge. Frigate birds trace lazy circles overhead, their forked tails scissoring the air. Small sandpipers run along the shore in quick little bursts of energy, stopping, poking, running again. And the water holds its color, deep, warm, reddish pink, completely still. The mangroves around the lagoons are home to a spider that builds its web at night between the arching roots, then retreats before morning. The webs catch the dew, and for a brief window at dawn, each thread holds a row of tiny water drops that catch the light like the most delicate possible string of beads. Then the sun rises a little higher, the dew evaporates, and the webs become invisible again, just there, waiting for evening. Everything here operates on its own patient timetable. The algae bloom when the conditions are right. The flamingos arrive when the food is there. The spiders build when the night is cool enough. The color deepens or fades with the season. Nothing forces anything. Everything simply happens in its own good time. That's a gentle thing to carry with you into sleep. Nothing needs to be forced tonight. Everything can happen in its own good time. Let's travel now to a place that feels further from the world than almost anywhere else, to the Crimean Peninsula, which stretches south into the Black Sea, and to a remarkable lake there called Lake Koyashskoye. It sits near the very tip of the peninsula, close to the coast, and in summer, it transforms into one of the most vivid pink lakes anywhere in the northern hemisphere. The landscape around Koyashskoye is steppe, wide, rolling grassland, pale gold in summer, dotted with wildflowers in spring. The Black Sea is nearby, and on clear days, looking out from the higher ground near the lake, you can see the water of the sea stretching away to the south, deep blue and glittering. Between the steppe and the sea, the lake sits in a shallow depression, small and intensely colored. What makes Koyashskoye particularly beautiful is the combination of its vivid color with a peculiar feature of its shoreline, stones. The beach around the lake is covered in white and pale-colored stones, each one coated in a thin layer of crystallized pink salt. The salt has been deposited gradually, layer by layer, by the evaporating lake water, and it clings to every surface it touches. Walk along this beach and the stones under your feet are pale pink. The pebbles in your hand are pale pink. Even the reed stems at the water's edge carry a faint rose coating. In the heat of summer, the air above Koyashskoye shimmers. The salt content is high enough to give the air a faint, clean sharpness. Not unpleasant, more like the edge of a freshly sliced cucumber or the smell of a mineral spring. The lake is shallow enough that in the hottest, driest part of summer, sections of it begin to dry out, leaving behind wide, flat expanses of pink salt crust that crack in geometric patterns, perfect hexagons and irregular tiles, like a vast mosaic floor laid out across the earth. These cracked salt patterns are some of the most extraordinary textures in nature. Each crack is precise and clean. The surface between cracks is smooth and slightly raised, as if pressed up gently from below. The color varies from almost white in the driest sections to a deep rose pink closer to the remaining water. Walking across it, if the crust is thick enough, produces a faint crunching sound, like walking on very delicate snow. The wild flowers of the steppe around the lake are another wonder. In spring, before the heat of summer intensifies, the grassland around Koyashskoye is scattered with small flowers, wild tulips, grape hyacinths, feathergrass, whose silver plumes catch every small movement of wind. The tulips here are not the large, cultivated tulips of a garden. They are small, nodding, intensely colored, deep red and yellow, sometimes striped. They grow close to the ground, as if aware of the wind that crosses this flat land in winter, and bracing for it, even in the warmth of spring. When the tulips are blooming, and the lake is pink, and the feather grass is moving in long silver waves across the steppe, the landscape has a quality that is both ancient and entirely immediate. It feels as though it has always looked exactly like this, as though you could have stood in this same spot 1,000 years ago and seen the same thing, the same pink lake, the same silver grass, the same small, bright flowers nodding in the same wind. There is enormous comfort in that continuity, in the knowledge that the earth keeps its own beauty without needing our attention or our approval. From Crimea, let's move northeast, deep into the Russian steppe and into Siberia, where several extraordinary pink lakes can be found in the Altai region and in the Novosibirsk Oblast. Siberia is a word that often brings cold to mind, and in winter, these lakes are indeed buried under ice and snow. But in summer, in that brief, intense Russian summer, when the days are very long and the warmth is almost urgent, some of these lakes bloom pink. Lake Shira in the Republic of Khakassia is a large salt lake surrounded by steppe. It has been known since ancient times for its mineral-rich water, which local tradition credited with healing properties. People traveled to bathe in it. Sanatoriums were built on its shore. The lake is large enough to have real waves in a strong wind, and its water is slightly pink, more of a rose tint than the vivid colors of Hillier or Koyashskoye, but present, warm, particular. In summer evenings at Lake Shira, the sky above the steppe goes through colors that match the water, pale rose, then deeper pink, then the particular orange-red of Siberian sunsets, which linger for a long time because of the high latitude. The reflected sky doubles all these colors in the water below. Further east, in the Novosibirsk Oblast, there's a smaller lake called Malinovoye, which means raspberry in Russian. The name is earned. In the right conditions, this lake turns a deep raspberry pink that local people have apparently regarded as entirely ordinary for generations. It sits among the flat Siberian landscape, surrounded by grassy shores, and in late summer, when the salt content peaks and the algae bloom, it glows. The raspberry lake has been harvested for salt historically, as many of the Russian steppe lakes have. Salt was an enormously valuable commodity for most of human history, a way of preserving food, of trading, of surviving the long winters. The pink lakes of the Russian steppe provided this resource to communities that had few others, and the relationship between the people and the lakes was, for centuries, one of deep, practical dependence. Now, the lakes are more valued for their color than their salt. People come to photograph them, to wade in the shallows, to feel the strange, thick warmth of highly saline water against their skin. Let the warmth of that water be something you imagine now. Warm, lifting, holding you gently. A small, lovely detail about the Siberian pink lakes. In early morning, when the mist lies over the steppe and the air is cool before the sun burns the haze away, the surface of a pink lake can look almost solid, like a field of rose-colored mist that you might walk across if you were brave enough. The reflection is so perfect, the surface so still, that the boundary between water and air becomes unclear. You stand at the shore, and you can't quite tell where one ends and the other begins. That threshold, that gentle confusion between two things, is where so much of the beauty in the world lives. Let's cross to the Americas, to Argentina, where the Andes Mountains run down the western spine of the continent like a long, slow exhalation of the earth, and where, in the province of La Pampa, there is a salt flat and lake system called the Coloradas, the colored ones, where the landscape opens up into something so wide and still that it seems to absorb sound. Argentina's pink lakes are found in the Pampas, that vast flat grassland that covers much of the country's interior. These are not the high, dramatic landscapes of the Andes, but the low, wind-swept, endlessly wide grasslands that go on in every direction until they meet the sky. Out here, distances lose their meaning. The horizon is always the same distance away. The sky is always the dominant thing. Laguna Melanque is a large, shallow salt lake in Santa Fe province. Not always pink, but in certain conditions it takes on a rosy cast that turns it, from a distance, into something that looks less like water and more like a piece of the sunset that fell and settled on the Pampas and decided to stay. The lake sits in a landscape that seems to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The low grassland around it is tawny and golden, and in afternoon light it glows in a way that makes everything in the scene feel warm and amber-toned. Flamingos visit Melanque. Of course they do. 3 species of flamingo live in South America: the Chilean flamingo, the Andean flamingo, and the Puna flamingo. And they move between the salt lakes of the continent, following conditions, following the blooms of algae and brine shrimp that sustain them. The Andean flamingo, which is the rarest of the 3, nests at very high altitude in the salt flats and volcanic lakes of the Andes, but comes down to lower lakes to feed in winter. These high Andean salt lakes are another kind of pink lake entirely, and we should visit them because they are among the most dramatically beautiful places on Earth. In the far northwest of Argentina, in the region called the Puna, the high-altitude plateau of the Andes, there are salt flats and lakes at elevations above 4,000 meters. The air is thin here. Colors are somehow more vivid at high altitude, partly because there is less atmosphere filtering the light, and partly because everything about the landscape is extreme. The mountains are steep and snow-capped. The volcanic rock is every shade from rust to purple. The salt flats are blinding white, and in some of the shallow lakes, where the conditions are right, the water is pink. Laguna Colorada in Bolivia, just across the border from Argentina, is one of the most famous of these high-altitude pink lakes. It sits at over 4,000 meters on the edge of the salt flat called the Salar de Uyuni, and it is a deep, vivid wine-red color, almost more red than pink, stained by the same algae we've met everywhere, concentrated here by evaporation and altitude. White borax deposits make islands of brilliant white within the red water. The contrast is extraordinary. Red water, white islands, volcanic peaks reflected in both. Thousands of flamingos breed at Laguna Colorada. In the morning, they stand in the red water, their pink-white bodies reflected, and the scene is simultaneously wild and gentle. The harshness of the high altitude softened by the bird's stillness and the water's warm color. The wind at Laguna Colorada is constant. It comes off the salt flats carrying a fine white dust that coats everything. At night, the temperature drops sharply, sometimes well below freezing even in summer, and the flamingos stand in the cold shallows through the night, conserving heat, apparently perfectly comfortable in conditions that would be brutal for almost any other creature. Dawn at Laguna Colorada arrives slowly. The sky lightens in stages, a dark blue-gray, then a paler gray-blue, then the first hint of rose along the eastern horizon, then gold, then full light flooding the entire landscape. During those minutes of transition, the red lake, the white salt, the volcanic peaks, and the gray-pink sky are all within the same narrow range of color, and the world looks as though someone mixed its palette from the same pot of earth tones and then tipped it gently over everything. A quiet reminder to check the playlist if you're finding these lake journeys helpful for drifting off. There are other slow stories there, just as gentle as this one, about forests, rain, the ocean at night, all waiting for you. For now, just let your body settle a little deeper. Notice how your hands have relaxed. Notice how the tension behind your eyes has eased, perhaps just slightly. We're moving now to Bolivia itself, to the Salar de Uyuni, the largest salt flat on Earth, which sits at the heart of the Bolivian Altiplano at an altitude of 3,656 meters. The Salar is not a pink lake. It is a vast white plain, the dried remnant of a prehistoric lake that covered this entire region thousands of years ago. The salt crust is meters thick in places, and beneath it, the largest lithium deposit in the world waits in brine. But at the edges of the Salar, and in the wet season, when a thin layer of water covers its surface, the Salar becomes something transcendental. The thin water layer acts as a perfect mirror, reflecting the sky so completely that the horizon line disappears. You cannot tell where the sky ends and the earth begins. You are standing inside the sky. You are surrounded by clouds and blue in every direction. And if the sky happens to carry the pinks and oranges of sunrise or sunset, then you are standing inside a world that is entirely pink, reflected above and below, with no edge or boundary anywhere. It is described by everyone who has experienced it as one of the most disorienting and beautiful things they have ever seen. The word that comes up over and over is infinite. It feels infinite. It feels like the world has quietly removed its walls and you've only just noticed. The western coast of Australia holds more pink water than almost anywhere else on Earth. Western Australia's climate, hot, dry, with a long, fierce summer, creates ideal conditions for the salt and algae that make pink lakes. And the coastline here is long and wild and largely uninhabited, which means that many of these lakes sit in silence that hasn't been disturbed in any significant way for a very long time. Hut Lagoon is one of the most dramatic of these coastal lakes. It runs parallel to the coast near the Abrolhos Islands, a chain of low coral islands where Dutch sailors once shipwrecked in the early 1600s, stranding them in one of the most remote places imaginable. The lagoon is long and thin, about 14 kilometers in length, and in the right conditions, it turns a vivid, blazing pink. Not the rosy pink of Hillier, deeper than that, more magenta, more electric. Hut Lagoon's color comes significantly from commercial cultivation. Dunaliella salina algae is farmed in the lagoon to produce beta-carotene, the orange-red pigment used in food coloring and nutritional supplements. This farming intensifies the color beyond what would naturally occur. So, Hut Lagoon, in many photographs, appears an almost surreal shade of hot pink that looks more like digital manipulation than reality. But it's real, completely real. You can fly over it and look down and see that blazing stripe of pink running along the coast, the turquoise Indian Ocean on one side and the pale brown scrubland on the other. And it seems to declare something about the strangeness and abundance of the natural world, that a lake can be this color, that the world contains this. The area around Hut Lagoon is part of the Coral Coast of Western Australia, named for the offshore coral reefs, including the Ningaloo Reef, which is one of the largest fringing coral reefs in the world. Whale sharks congregate off this coast each year, and the water in the Indian Ocean here is extraordinarily clear. Warm, tropical edge water in shades of turquoise and cobalt. The contrast between that ocean color and the pink of the lagoon is just one more example of the way this part of Australia seems to have decided that subtlety is optional. Not far from Hut Lagoon, in the same coastal region, there are smaller pink lakes scattered through the bush that are visited by almost no one. Lakes without signposts or roads, known mainly to the farmers and station workers who live in the surrounding country. Some of these are only pink for a few weeks each year at the peak of summer heat, and for the rest of the year they look quite ordinary, gray or cream or simply dry. But for those few weeks, they are quietly extraordinary, seen by no one in particular, being beautiful for their own reasons. Let's think about that for a moment. As we've thought about it before, the lakes being pink without an audience, the world conducting its color experiments in empty places for no other reason than that the conditions are right. There is something profoundly restful about a world that doesn't need to be watched to be itself. Moving up the western Australian coast, we come to the Pilbara region, an ancient, iron-rich landscape of deep red rock and spinifex grassland, one of the oldest exposed rock formations on Earth. The iron oxide that gives the Pilbara its characteristic red color also colors the dust and the soil and, in some lakes, the water. Occasional lakes in this region carry a rust red or reddish pink tinge from minerals rather than algae, a different chemistry producing a similar effect, the land coloring the water from below rather than from within. The Pilbara's heat is extraordinary. In summer, temperatures regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius. The rock absorbs heat during the day and releases it slowly through the night, so even after dark, the air remains warm. The night skies out here, away from any city lights, are some of the most spectacular on Earth. the Milky Way arching from horizon to horizon, so dense and close that it seems solid. Imagine lying on still warm red rock at midnight, looking up at that sky. The Milky Way above, a pink lake somewhere in the darkness nearby, the spinifex moving slightly in a warm night wind, the vast quiet of one of the oldest places on Earth. You don't need to be there to feel it. Just let the image rest gently on your mind. The warm rock, the enormous sky, the pink lake reflecting stars. Shall we take a moment? Breathe slowly. There's still so much of this journey left, and all of it is gentle. Let's visit a lake that many people don't know about. A pink lake in the middle of a city. In the Australian state of Victoria, not far from the town of Dimboola in the Wimmera region, there is a lake called Pink Lake. Its name is straightforward, honest, without decoration. It is pink, it is a lake. And for many years it sat beside the highway between Melbourne and Adelaide, visible to anyone who happened to look to the right at the right moment. Travelers on that long, flat highway would sometimes suddenly notice a flash of pink beside the road. Unexpected, almost alarming in its vividness against the dry brown grass of the Wimmera. And then it would be gone, past. Some would stop and come back. Others would simply carry it with them. A small, bright mystery on a long drive. Pink Lake Dimboola has had some challenges in recent decades. Changes in rainfall patterns and water management have affected the salinity of the lake, and for some years, the pink was less reliable than it once was. But in good seasons, with the right conditions, it still blushes. It still catches people off guard. It still makes drivers slow down. The Wimmera is wheat country. Vast, flat fields of grain, golden in summer, stretch away in every direction. The sky here is wide and pale blue, faded slightly by heat and dust. And in the middle of this landscape, the Pink Lake is a small, concentrated surprise. A jewel in a setting made entirely of gold and dust. There are farmhouses visible from the lake shore, grain silos in the distance, a highway, and this perfectly pink lake existing without apology in the middle of the ordinary world. That is one of the things I find most remarkable about the pink lakes, not the remote ones in the Australian wilderness or the high Andes, but the ones that exist right next to the everyday, right next to the highway, right at the edge of town, reminding you that the extraordinary was here all along, going about its own business while you were going about yours. Let's step now into a completely different landscape, to Portugal, to the Algarve coast in the far south, where the land is limestone and ochre, and where the Atlantic comes in from the west in long, steady rolls. The Algarve is famous for its extraordinary coastline, golden cliffs, hidden coves, arched sea stacks that rise from the water in shapes that look architectural. But inland, in the marshlands near the coast, there are salt pans that in the right season turn pink. The Ria Formosa Natural Park is a coastal lagoon and salt marsh system that stretches along the southern Algarve coast. It's a protected area, a network of barrier islands, tidal channels, salt marshes and mudflats that forms one of the most important wetland habitats in Europe. Flamingos live here year-round now, a colony that has established itself over the past few decades as the climate has warmed. They wade through the channels and salt pans in their elegant, deliberate way, entirely at home in this southern European landscape. The salt pans within the Ria Formosa, particularly the older traditional ones that are managed by hand in the centuries-old manner, sometimes develop the pink-producing algae that colors the water. The process is the same as always. High salinity, warm, shallow water, the right amount of sun. The salt workers here call this phenomenon the blooming of the lake. The blooming, as if the lake were a flower. Portuguese salt has been harvested from these coastal lagoons for over 2,000 years. The Romans made salt here. The Moors made salt here. Medieval merchants traded it across Europe. And today, small-scale salt producers still work the Algarve pans in the traditional way, harvesting fleur de sel, the delicate crystals that form on the very surface of the water, by hand, using long wooden rakes. They work in the early morning before the heat of the day. The crystals they collect are slightly pink-tinged from the algae, fleur de sel from pink pans, eaten on bread, on fish, on the simplest food, carrying in its taste something of the pink lake, something of the early morning, something of the water and the light and the long patient wait for the crystals to form. There is a small, sweet fact about fleur de sel. It can only be harvested when the conditions are exactly right. If the wind is too strong, the crystals are disturbed before they can be collected. If it rains, the salinity drops. The harvest depends entirely on the cooperation of the weather, and the salt worker's art is partly the art of learning to read the sky and the wind and knowing when to come and when to wait. Everything, again, on its own patient timetable. If these slow journeys through the world's beautiful places are helping you drift and rest, please do leave a like. It's such a simple thing, and it means a great deal to keeping this channel going. And remember, the playlist is there, full of other quiet travels whenever you need one. Portugal in late afternoon, with the Ria Formosa spread out below you from a low hillside, flamingos moving slowly through the channels, the sea beyond, and somewhere in the salt pans, the faintest possible blush of pink on still water, the scent of salt and rosemary, the call of a bird you can't quite identify, the sun beginning to lower toward the Atlantic. Breathe that in, let it settle. Now let's move to somewhere most people have never imagined as a place of pink lakes, to Kazakhstan, the vast, largely empty country in Central Asia, the 9th largest country in the world by area, with a population smaller than many cities. Kazakhstan is steppes and deserts and mountain ranges, and in its western parts, the shores of the Caspian Sea. It is a landscape of extreme weather and extraordinary space. In western Kazakhstan, near the ancient city of Oral and stretching south toward the Caspian Depression, there are numerous salt lakes that in summer transform into vivid pinks and reds. Lake Burabay, though better known for its forests and rocky outcrops in the north of the country, is surrounded by other, smaller, lesser-known lakes that carry the pink signature of saline algae. But the most striking are found further south and west, near the town of Inderbor, along the floodplains of the Ural River. Shallow depressions in the flat steppe landscape fill with water in spring from snowmelt, and then slowly concentrate through the long hot summer until, by August, they are extremely salty and extremely pink. They sit in a landscape that has no obvious drama, no mountains, no forests, no dramatic coastline, just flat, pale steppe grass stretching away in every direction, and these quiet, improbable lakes glowing pink and rose in the summer heat. The steppe in summer is not an easy place. The heat rises off the flat land in waves. The grass dries and bleaches. Dust blows from dried lake beds and former agricultural land. And yet, in this harsh, stripped-down landscape, the pink lakes are startlingly beautiful. The color seems more vivid for the neutrality of everything surrounding it. Migrating birds pass through this region in enormous numbers. Kazakhstan lies along a major flyway connecting Siberia to the Middle East, India, and East Africa. Geese, ducks, waders, raptors, they move through in autumn in flocks that can darken the sky. For these birds, the salt lakes of western Kazakhstan are important resting and feeding stops. Even the extremely saline pink ones support certain organisms. The brine shrimp and specific flies that can survive in salt-saturated water and that provide food for certain specialized waders. There is something wonderful about these birds. Birds that have come from Siberia, that are heading to Africa or India, stopping for a while at a pink lake in the middle of the Kazakh steppe. The lake doesn't know where they've come from or where they're going. It just provides what it provides: water, food, rest, a stopping place on a long journey. Maybe that's what a good night's sleep is in its own way. A stopping place, not the destination, just the rest between one part of the journey and the next. Let's stay with the idea of stopping places for a moment. The world is full of them, places where creatures pause and rest on long migrations, places where travelers have stopped for centuries, places where you can set your bag down and breathe. In the Middle East, in Iran, there is a salt lake called Urmia, once one of the largest salt lakes in the world, larger than any lake in Europe except the Caspian Sea. Urmia has shrunk dramatically over recent decades due to water diversion and climate. But in its remaining portions, in the sections where the water is still present and salty enough, it turns pink and red from the same familiar cast of algae and brine shrimp. At its peak, Lake Urmia was home to an extraordinary population of brine shrimp so dense that the lake bottom was sometimes pink from the mass of tiny creatures. Flamingos gathered by the hundreds of thousands. The lake was a wonder of the region, known and celebrated for millennia. The shrinking of Urmia is one of those stories that carries sadness if you let it. But for our purposes tonight, we won't dwell there. Instead, let's hold the image of what Urmia has been and still is in its remaining blue-pink waters. And let that be enough. The flamingos still come. The color still emerges in the right conditions. The lake is still doing its best with what it has, which is, when you think about it, all any of us can do. There is a pink lake on an island in the Mediterranean that feels like a secret. The island of Sardinia, that large, rugged island off the western coast of Italy, has been inhabited for thousands of years, is full of ancient stone towers and Roman ruins and medieval villages, and is surrounded by water so clear it appears to have been lit from below. And in the southern part of the island, near the city of Cagliari, there are coastal lagoons called the Stagno di Molentargius, a wetland complex that stretches between the city and the sea. Molentargius is a former salt pan, an industrial salt production site that operated for centuries and was eventually abandoned. When the salt industry left, the lagoons were left to themselves, and nature moved in with quiet efficiency. Today, Molentargius is a nature reserve, a rambling, reedy, half-wild wetland in the middle of a city. You can walk its paths and hear the city of Cagliari on one side and the absolute silence of the wetland on the other. And the flamingos came. A pair were first spotted in 1993, just 2 birds resting in the lagoon on a migration. The next year, more came. Then nesting began. Today, Molentargius hosts one of the largest flamingo colonies in Europe. Thousands of birds breeding in the shallow lagoon water, raising their improbably long-legged chicks on islands of mud, going about their flamingo lives in the middle of an Italian city. The citizens of Cagliari regard this with enormous warmth. The flamingos have become part of the city's identity. There are flamingo images on shop fronts and restaurants, flamingo sculptures, flamingo everything. The birds are visible from apartment windows and office buildings. They wade through the lagoon water, which in summer takes on that characteristic pink blush from the salt algae, and they seem entirely comfortable with the city watching them. A wild, shy creature making itself at home in the most human of places, deciding that the city and the wetland can coexist, that there is room for both. The water of Molentargius is a relatively pale pink, more of a rose blush than the vivid color of Hillier or Hutt Lagoon. But in the right light, early morning especially, when the surface is still and the flamingos are standing quietly, and Cagliari is just beginning to wake up around the edges of the reserve, the lagoon holds its color with a quiet confidence that is entirely its own. From Sardinia, let's go to one more Mediterranean island, to Cyprus, where the Akrotiri Salt Lake occupies a large, flat depression on the southern cape of the island. Akrotiri is another lake that transforms seasonally. In winter and spring, it holds fresh water and is visited by enormous numbers of migratory birds, including flamingos that spend the cooler months there. In summer, it evaporates almost completely, leaving behind a white and sometimes faintly pink salt flat. Cyprus in summer is hot and dry and golden. The landscape around Akrotiri is low and flat, salt-tolerant plants fringing the edges of the lake, the sea just visible in the distance, ancient carob trees dotting the surrounding hillsides. The carob tree is one of the most patient plants in existence. It can live for hundreds of years, surviving drought and heat with quiet stubbornness, producing its long dark seed pods year after year without drama. There is a legend in Cyprus that the flamingos of Akrotiri were put there by the goddess Aphrodite, who was said to have been born from the sea foam just off the coast of this same island. Whether or not you believe in the goddess, there is something apt about the association. The flamingos and the pink lake together. They do seem like something a goddess of beauty might arrange if she were in a playful and generous mood. The Akrotiri wetland is also home to Eleonora's falcons, a species that breeds on the rocky Mediterranean islands and cliffs, and is named for a medieval Sardinian queen who enacted what may have been the world's first bird protection laws in the 14th century. The falcons are slender and fast, and they time their breeding to coincide with the autumn migration of small songbirds across the Mediterranean, feeding their chicks on the migrants that pass through. The timing of things in nature is extraordinary. Everything synchronized to everything else. The falcon breeding timed to the migration timed to the season timed to the turn of the earth. All of it happening together in the same vast, patient coordination. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a pink lake sitting still in the Mediterranean sun, being looked at by falcons and flamingos, and occasionally, on a winter morning, by a very lucky human being. We haven't visited Antarctica yet, and Antarctica deserves a visit because even there, even in that most extreme, most austere of places, there are pink lakes. Antarctica's pink lakes are a different phenomenon from the ones we've been visiting. They don't owe their color to salt and algae in the same way, though algae still plays a role. Instead, many of the pinkish-tinged lakes and ponds found near Antarctic research stations and in the ice-free areas of the continent owe their unusual colors to a combination of iron minerals, specific cold-adapted algae, and the extraordinary clarity of Antarctic light. Antarctica receives more solar radiation than almost anywhere else on Earth during its summer months. The sun doesn't set for months at a time, and the air is so dry and clear that the light comes in at full strength without the filtering of humidity or dust. In this extraordinary light, a pond with even a small amount of pink-producing organisms can glow with a color intensity that seems impossible. The Bunger Hills region of East Antarctica, one of the continent's ice-free oases, has lakes that range in color from brilliant blue to rust red to pink rose. They sit in a landscape of exposed rock, striped and layered in the geological record of deep time. With the Antarctic ice sheet rising around them, in summer, meltwater trickles from the ice into the lakes, keeping them liquid, and the organisms that have adapted to this extreme environment, cold, salty, under constant summer light, bloom in colors that have no real parallel anywhere else on Earth. Very few human beings have ever stood beside one of these Antarctic pink lakes. The Bunger Hills are accessible only by aircraft, and visits are rare and brief. The lakes sit in their silence as they have sat for thousands of years, being pink and cold and utterly indifferent to their own beauty. The silence of Antarctica is described by everyone who has experienced it as unlike any other silence. There is no ambient noise, no traffic, no wind in trees, no human activity. In still conditions, you can sometimes hear your own heartbeat. You can hear the sound of your own breathing as a significant thing. The ice creaks and sighs occasionally, making small sounds as it shifts and settles. But these sounds come from so far away and so rarely that they only deepen the silence when they stop. Imagine a pink lake in that silence, the ice reflecting in its surface. The Antarctic sky, which in summer can be the most improbably vivid blue, a blue that looks painted rather than real, arching overhead, and nothing moving. Nothing at all moving, except perhaps a thin ribbon of steam from a geothermal vent somewhere in the distance, rising very slowly into the still air. Take a moment with that image. Let it be completely still. Let everything in you go quiet, the way the ice goes quiet. The small organisms that live in Antarctic lakes are among the most remarkable survivors in the world. Some species of algae and bacteria found in these extreme environments have evolved to photosynthesize under ice, using the tiny amounts of light that filter through. They've been doing this for thousands of years without any help or observation from anyone, quietly alive, quietly coloring their world. Among the most extraordinary of these are the cryophyllid algae, literally cold-loving algae, that grow in snow and ice itself. When you see pink or red snow in mountain regions or polar areas, it is usually these algae at work. Millions of tiny organisms living in the snow, producing pink and red carotenoid pigments that protect them from the intense ultraviolet radiation of high altitude and high latitude environments. Watermelon snow, people sometimes call it. It even has a faint, sweet smell. So, the pink doesn't only belong to lakes. It is distributed through the world's cold, high, salty, and extreme places. Everywhere the conditions are right, life finds a way to paint its corner of the world with warmth. Let's return to warmth now. From Antarctica back to the tropics, to a place that feels as different as possible from that polar silence, to the Caribbean, to the island of Bonaire, a flat, dry, coral limestone island in the southern Caribbean, just off the coast of Venezuela, where flamingos breed and salt lakes glitter, and the sea is so clear that the coral is visible from 30 meters depth. Bonaire's salt industry is still active. The Cargill Salt Works operate in the southern part of the island, and the salt pans here produce salt for distribution across the Americas. From the air, the production area looks like a quilt of colors: pale blue, white, pink, and terracotta pools arranged in geometric grids, each at a different stage of the evaporation process, each a slightly different shade. The deepest pink sections, where evaporation is most advanced and the salt is almost ready to harvest, are an extraordinary color. Not quite pink, not quite red, but something in between, a vivid, saturated coral color that is entirely unique to this stage of salt production. It looks like the landscape has been colored in by a child with a very determined hand and exactly the right crayon. Bonaire's flamingos are some of the most approachable in the world. The island is small, and the birds have been living alongside humans here for so long that they are relatively unperturbed by people who keep a respectful distance. You can watch them feeding in the pink pans from a short distance. Standing at the edge of the Saltworks Road, the pink water bright in the afternoon sun, the flamingos moving through it in their unhurried way, their curved necks sweeping through the water in that distinctive upside-down feeding motion. Flamingos feed by holding their bill upside down in the water and using a specialized filtering structure similar in principle to a whale's baleen to strain tiny organisms from the water and mud. The filtering action requires the head to be inverted, the bill held at the surface, the tongue pumping water in and out rapidly. From a distance, you see the graceful pink birds moving slowly through pink water, their necks curving down into the surface. From close up, the mechanics of feeding are actually somewhat busy and vigorous. The tongue moves dozens of times per second. The bill makes small, rapid movements. But the overall impression remains serene. The efficiency is invisible. The grace is all you see. Bonaire is also a diver's paradise. The coral reef begins just meters from shore, accessible without a boat. The coral here, in a marine reserve that has been protected for decades, is some of the most intact in the Caribbean. Elkhorn coral, brain coral, pillar coral, rising in shapes that have grown slowly over centuries. Fish move through them in dense, flowing schools. Their colors, yellow, blue, orange, silver, as vivid as anything on land. And somehow the pink lakes and the coral reef and the flamingos all coexist on this one small, flat, quiet island in the South Caribbean. The world here is just insistently, abundantly beautiful in every direction. If you're still with us, still drifting through these pink-tinted places, we'd love a gentle like on this video if it's helping you relax and wind down. That small gesture keeps this channel alive, and the playlist is there whenever tonight feels like the right kind of night for another journey. Let your breathing be easy. Let your body be heavy and warm. In the Indian Ocean, just east of Madagascar, the island of Réunion is a volcanic island of extraordinary drama. Steep mountains, active volcanoes, deep ravines cut by rivers that pour down from the highlands to the sea. It is not, at first thought, a place you'd expect to find a pink lake. And in fact, the pink lake of Réunion is not pink in the same way as our other lakes. It is a crater lake formed in a volcanic caldera, and it holds a particular hue of pale rose gray that comes from sulfur and mineral content in the water. But there is something deeply peaceful about crater lakes, even when they're not purely pink. They sit in perfect stillness at the center of ancient volcanic cones, water collected in a bowl made by fire, now entirely quiet. The violence that created the container is long in the past. What remains is still water and silence, and often a thin mist that drifts across the surface in the early morning. Réunion's landscapes shift dramatically from sea level to the mountain heights. Coastal villages of colorful houses, sugarcane fields, then climbing into forest, then into the high, eerie landscape of the volcanic highlands, where the vegetation is sparse and the rock is dark and new. At these heights, the clouds sometimes sit below you, and you look down at a white ceiling with blue sea glimpsed through gaps, and the isolation is complete. The salt lakes of southern Spain, the Salinas, are another world that deserves slow visiting. Andalusia, that southernmost region of Spain, where the heat is heavy and the light is golden white, has a long tradition of salt production in coastal and inland lakes. The Salinas de Santa Pola, near Alicante on the Mediterranean coast. The Salinas de Torrevieja, where the lake turns a vivid pink red in summer. The Salinas de Calpe, the great Laguna de Fuente de Piedra in Malaga province, the only stable flamingo breeding site in the Iberian Peninsula. Torrevieja is particularly worth pausing at. It's a large lake, about 1,000 hectares, and it sits next to another lake called La Mata, which is fresher water. The two lakes together form a natural park. Torrevieja itself, in summer, turns a red-pink that is somewhere between cherry and rose. The salt is harvested commercially. Torrevieja is one of the largest salt producers in Spain, and the pink salt from this lake can be found in gourmet shops across Europe. The town of Torrevieja grew up around the salt industry. The local people have a saying, loosely translated, that the salt lake feeds the town, and it always has, for at least 2,000 years of documented history. The Phoenicians made salt here. The Romans made salt here. Medieval Spanish kingdoms depended on Torrevieja salt for preserving fish. The trade routes of salt moved through these ports across the Mediterranean world. All of that history sits quietly in the pink water. The lake doesn't remember it exactly, but it holds the evidence of it in the worn channels and old salt pans and stone walls of former works. The landscape itself is a record. The flamingos at Fuente de Piedra, about 50 kilometers inland from the coast, are part of one of the most studied flamingo colonies in Europe. This lake is shallow, highly saline, and in dry years can partially evaporate. The flamingos have lived and bred here for longer than any records show. Researchers have been studying them intensively since the 1980s and have learned, among other things, that flamingo parenting is extremely dedicated. Both parents take turns incubating the single egg and feeding the chick a liquid called crop milk, which is produced by the parent's digestive system and is colored pink by carotenoids. A pink bird feeding its chick pink milk on a pink lake, the color running all the way through. Let's linger in Spain a little longer. The light in Andalusia in late afternoon has a quality that painters have been chasing for centuries. A warm, amber, slightly dust-diffused quality that makes everything glow from within. The white walls of the villages, the sunflower fields, the olive trees with their pale gray-green leaves, and the salt lakes going from pink to gold to the deepest rose as the sun drops to the horizon. There is a special word in Portuguese, though the Spanish feel it too, called saudade. It's usually translated as a longing or nostalgia, a sweet ache for something beautiful that has passed or is passing. Standing at the edge of Torrevieja in late afternoon, watching the pink deepen and the flamingos go still and the salt crusting on the stones at your feet going from white to gold, you might feel something like that. Not sadness exactly, more like a tenderness toward the beauty of things, a recognition that this particular moment, this color, this light, this warmth will pass, and that its passing is part of what makes it beautiful. That's a good feeling to drift toward sleep on. The tenderness toward beautiful passing things. Let's visit one more surprising location for pink water. Canada. In the province of British Columbia, tucked in the dry interior of the province in a region called the South Okanagan, there is a lake called Spotted Lake, though Spotted Lake is not pink for the same reasons as our other lakes. Spotted Lake, or Kliluk in the language of the Okanagan First Nation people who have considered it sacred for generations, is a remarkable saline lake that in summer, as it evaporates, leaves behind a series of colorful mineral pools, each one a different color depending on which minerals are most concentrated in that particular section. Some pools are yellow from sulfates, some are green from magnesium sulfate, some are pale blue from other minerals, and some, in certain conditions, are a pale rosy pink. The Okanagan people call this lake a place of healing. They have come here for centuries, for longer than recorded history, to gather the minerals from its shores and pools for medicinal and ceremonial purposes. During the First World War, the mineral deposits from the lake were harvested and used in the production of ammunition. A connection that feels jarring now, the healing lake contributing to the machinery of war. That history was not the lake's choice. The lake continued to be what it had always been, quietly mineral, quietly colorful, quietly sacred to the people who had always known it. Today, the lake is owned by the Okanagan Nation Alliance, having been returned to the indigenous community after decades of effort. It is visible from the road, a series of spotted circles of color in a brown and golden landscape. But visitors are asked to observe from a respectful distance. The lake's sacredness is honored by not walking in it, not collecting from it, not treating it as a curiosity to be consumed. There is something right about that. Some places deserve to be seen from a distance, to be known without being touched, to be held in the mind as a whole rather than examined piece by piece. Let that be a thought to rest in for a moment. The value of things that are simply there, seen from a respectful distance, allowed to be themselves. Canada has other pink and unusual water. In Saskatchewan and Manitoba, various shallow prairie lakes develop algae blooms in summer that can give the water pink, red, or bright green colors. These are sometimes health advisories rather than beauties. Certain types of algae bloom can indicate poor water conditions. But in the clean salt lakes of the prairies, where the color comes from the same familiar Dunaliella and related organisms, the pink is benign and brief and lovely. The Canadian prairies in summer are extraordinary, as flat as the Australian outback, as wide as the Russian steppe, with a sky that seems to contain more sky than seems possible. Thunderstorms build in the afternoon above the wheat fields, enormous tall thunderheads reaching up into the atmosphere, their tops lit white by sun, their bottoms dark and gray. Lightning moves between them and the earth. And the small pink lakes sit below all this drama, perfectly still, perfectly themselves. Let's finish this part of our journey in New Zealand, a country that seems designed to contain every kind of landscape in a small space. New Zealand has geothermal activity throughout its North Island, and near Rotorua, where the earth is thin and hot and productive, there are colored pools and terraces of deposited minerals that include shades of pink and rose. The pink and white terraces of Rotorua were, before their destruction in a volcanic eruption in 1886, considered the eighth wonder of the natural world. Vast stepped formations of silica, deposited by geothermal water over centuries, that cascaded down a hillside in shades of white and pink. The pink color came from particular algae that lived in the warm, mineral-rich pools. Visitors came from around the world to see them. Artists painted them. Then Tarawera erupted, and they were buried. In recent years, evidence has suggested that parts of the terraces may still exist under the sediment of Lake Raramahana. They may still be there, pink and white, preserved under meters of volcanic ash, waiting. Perhaps one day they'll be seen again. Perhaps not. But the possibility, the idea that something of that extraordinary beauty might still exist, hidden and patient under the surface of a New Zealand lake, is a gentle and wonderful thing to hold. We are coming gently toward the end of our long journey through the world's pink waters. Let's move slowly. Let's not hurry toward any conclusion. There is a lake we haven't visited that I want to spend some time with. It is in Ethiopia, in the East African Rift Valley, and it is called Lake Natron. Natron is not what you would call a comfortable lake. Its water is extremely alkaline, rich in sodium carbonate, and hot in places near geothermal springs along its shores. The temperature can exceed 60 degrees Celsius in some sections. The lake's chemistry is inhospitable to most life. And yet, the lake is red, deeply, richly, dark red. Not from Dunaliella this time, but from a specific type of salt-loving microorganism called Haloarchaea, which produces red and orange pigments as a protection against the intense East African sun. In the right conditions, Lake Natron looks like the landscape itself is bleeding color, a vast dark red expanse against the dry brown and ochre of the Rift Valley, with the volcano Oldoinyo Lengai rising above it in the distance. Oldoinyo Lengai which means mountain of God in the Maasai language, is an active carbonatite volcano. It erupts not with the red lava most volcanoes produce, but with black lava. Carbonatite lava, rich in sodium and calcium carbonate, which is much lower in temperature than regular volcanic rock and is black and liquid when it flows. Over time, exposure to moisture turns this black lava white. So the volcano alternately produces black flows and white deposits, a mountain in constant slow transformation. Below this extraordinary mountain, the Red Lake. Lake Natron is the only regular breeding site for the lesser flamingo in the world. Somewhere between 75% and 90% of all lesser flamingos are born here, on islands of mud and salt, in the middle of that extreme red water. The eggs are incubated by parents who stand in the hot, caustic water on the specialized leathery skin of their legs. The chicks hatch in the heat and must walk long distances to reach fresh water after hatching, sometimes several kilometers across the alkaline flats. The cycle continues year after year. The flamingos return, the eggs are laid, the chicks walk, and the lake stays red, and the volcano stays white and black above it, and the Maasai cattle graze on the flats around the edges, and the whole thing goes on without needing anyone to watch or understand it. There is so much life in the world that we will never witness. So many eggs hatching, so many small journeys being made, so many colors glowing in empty places at this exact moment as you lie here. The pink lakes are being pink right now. Some are in daylight, some in darkness, some under rain, some under clear desert stars. They don't know you're here, but in some quiet sense, we've spent this evening with them. Let's gather a few last facts, as gently as possible, before we close. The Dead Sea, technically a lake, not a sea, sits between Israel and Jordan in the Jordan Rift Valley. It is so salty that no complex life can live in it. But even the Dead Sea has its moments of color. After rare rainfall events bring fresh water to the northern basin, an unusual process can cause algal blooms that turn parts of the lake reddish. The Dead Sea occasionally, briefly, turns the same color as its more famously pink cousins. In India, in the state of Rajasthan, the Sambar Salt Lake, the largest inland salt lake in India, turns pink in its saline sections. It sits in a flat desert landscape and has been producing salt for over 1,000 years, with historical records of salt production at Sambar going back to the medieval period and possibly much earlier. Flamingos visit in their thousands in winter. The Sambar Lake is also a Ramsar wetland site, protected under an international convention for its ecological importance. The Great Salt Lake in Utah in the American West divides into two sections separated by a railway causeway built in the 19th century. The southern section, which receives more freshwater inflow, is less salty. The northern section is far more concentrated, and the northern section, Rosal Point and the surrounding water, turns pink and red from the same algae and archaea we've met everywhere. The northern section of the Great Salt Lake is, depending on conditions, one of the largest pink lakes in North America. The Great Salt Lake also hosts brine shrimp in enormous quantities, and the brine shrimp here are harvested commercially and exported around the world to be used as fish food in aquaculture. So, when you eat farmed fish anywhere on the planet, there is a good chance the fish was fed in part on brine shrimp from the pink water of the Great Salt Lake. The world connects itself in ways that are too small and numerous to track. We have traveled a long way together tonight. From the green island shores of Western Australia to the flat, golden pampas of Argentina, from the volcanic black rock of the Canary Islands to the polar silence of Antarctica, from the salt pans of Andalusia to the sacred spotted waters of British Columbia, from flamingos standing in Kenyan alkaline lakes at dawn to brine shrimp being harvested in Utah to feed fish in a faraway country. And through all of it, the same small, patient, extraordinary organisms, the Dunaliella algae, the Haloarchaea, the brine shrimp, the spirulina, painting the world with the same color: pink, rose, magenta, coral, raspberry, the colors of warmth, the colors of a sky just before the sun rises, or just after it sets. There is something I've been sitting with throughout this whole long journey. It's the idea that the color of these lakes, this extraordinary, improbable, beautiful pink, is not decoration. It's life. It's the result of tiny living things doing what they do, surviving, adapting, finding ways to exist in extreme conditions. The color is a byproduct of living. The beauty is a byproduct of chemistry and survival and millions of years of evolution. And it's given freely. To the flamingos who depend on it, to the salt workers who harvest around it, to the travelers who see it from planes and pull over on Australian highways and stand at the edges of Bolivian salt flats. To you, tonight, letting these images rest gently in your mind as the day releases its hold and the night takes over. The pink lakes don't give their color intentionally. They don't know anyone is watching. They just are what they are, fully, consistently, in every kind of weather and every kind of light. There is a great gentleness in that, a model of something. The brine shrimp don't know they're beautiful. The algae doesn't know it paints anything. The flamingos don't know that standing in pink water makes them into a sight that stops human hearts. Everything just does what it does. And the beauty is something that happens in the space between the thing and the one who sees it. You are part of that. Your seeing is part of how the beauty exists. But not tonight. Tonight, you can let your eyes close and stop seeing. The lakes will be pink without you. The flamingos will stand through the night in their resting stance. One leg tucked up, necks curved, eyes closed. The salt will crystallize slowly on the stones at the water's edge. The stars will come out above the Great Salt Lake and the Salar de Uyuni and the steppe lakes of Kazakhstan. The Southern Ocean will murmur beyond the trees on Middle Island, where Lake Hillier glows in the dark. All of it going on quietly, without requiring anything from you. If this journey has been a companion to your evening, if these slow, soft lake stories have helped you let go of the day, a quiet like before you sleep would mean the world to this channel. And the playlist is there whenever you need another slow trip through somewhere beautiful. No hurry, it'll keep. But for now, let everything go a little. Think of Lake Hillier from above. That perfect, vivid rose pressed into the green island, the blue ocean on every side. Think of flamingos in the red water of Natron at first light, still and patient. Think of the cracked pink salt of Koyashskoye, each perfect tile of dried salt catching the last of the afternoon sun. Think of the thin layer of water over the Salar de Uyuni, the sky reflected below your feet, the world opened up in every direction into pure color. Think of warmth. Think of stillness. Think of the world in this moment being full of pink water glowing quietly in its corners, in places you'll never visit, being extraordinary for no one in particular and everyone who passes. You are warm, you are safe, you are held by the same world that holds the pink lakes, gently, without fuss, without requiring anything. Let your breath go long and slow. Let your body remember that it knows how to rest. Let the day drift back to wherever days go when they're finished. The lakes are still. The flamingos are sleeping. The stars are coming out over the salt. Everything is quiet now. Everything is well. Rest gently. You've traveled far tonight.